Thank you for joining us today. I am Walt Bauer, and I'm the Pre-Service Training Coordinator at the Human Development Institute at the University of Kentucky. My brief visual description is I'm a white male wearing glasses with hazel eyes and a blue collared shirt with a blue and gray tie. My pronouns are he, him, his. My virtual background is a three-story brick academic building that has offices for the Human Development Institute on the University of Kentucky campus. I'm going to provide a few housekeeping details and turn it over to Dr. Rachel Womack, the training director at the Human Development Institute, to introduce our topic and presenters today. We use Zoom for our virtual platform. Our speakers will provide an opportunity for questions today, and we welcome questions from all of our participants. Please type your questions for our speakers in the Q&A box for a robust question and answer session. If you hover over the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see the Q&A option. Please use the chat box for technical questions. We have real-time captioning for the webinar and the closed captioning feature. Turn on the captioning by clicking on the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen and then clicking Show Subtitle. Should you have questions about CEUs, you can contact me. My email address is walt.bauer@uky.edu. Again, my email address is walt.bauer@uky.edu. Please take a moment to complete our brief evaluation. You will receive an email that provides a link to access the session evaluation after the webinar. It is really helpful as we plan for upcoming webinars. I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Rachel Womack.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bauer. As he mentioned, my name is Dr. Rachel Womack. I am the training director here at the University of Kentucky's Human Development Institute. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. To give you a brief visual description, I am a white woman with long, straight brown hair. I am wearing glasses and a cream-colored sweater today, and I have my background blurred. It's a pleasure to have everyone here at our third in our spring seminar series at the Human Development Institute. The title of today's seminar is More Than Welcome: Libraries Serving Families of Young Children with Disabilities. Our conversation will be moderated by three presenters. They are Dr. Maria Cahill from the UK School of Information Science, Dr. Derek Daskalakis from the UK School of Information Science, and our very own Dr. Caroline Gooden from the UK Human Development Institute. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Cahill.
Hey everybody, I'm Maria Cahill. I am a white woman. I'm wearing glasses and a green shirt. And in my background are pictures of my children who are on the back wall of my office. Thank you for joining us today and participating in this conversation about how libraries are serving families of young children with disabilities. This webinar is a culminating product of the Services for Children of All Abilities, an exploration, or what we call the SCALE project. It's a multi-dimensional, multi-state, multi-site case study research project that was designed to explore how libraries are currently serving families with young children with disabilities, with an eye toward improving positive practices that could be replicated by libraries nationwide. We'll begin with an overview of the project rationale and design, and then we'll share an overview of findings with greater detail and attention to those inclusionary practices that are most meaningful and applicable across public libraries, regardless of size and budget. Throughout the presentation, you're welcome to post questions and comments in the Q&A. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll address those questions and comments and open the floor for others to share. Before we get started, let me take just a moment to introduce our team. I'm Dr. Maria Cahill. I'm the director and a primary investigator of the project. I'm from the School of Information Science at the University of Kentucky, and also from the University of Kentucky. And with me here today are Dr. Caroline Gooden and Dr. Derek Daskalakis. I'll turn the floor over to Caroline to introduce herself, and then she'll pass the torch to Derek.
Hey everyone, I am Caroline Gooden. My visual description is I have shoulder-length hair, a blue sweater, and my blue background shows the Human Development Institute. I'm an early childhood researcher and teacher at the Human Development Institute here at UK, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. Derek, your turn.
My name is Derek Daskalakis. My physical description is I'm a white male with a bald head and glasses and Kentucky blue shirt. My background is the blinds and closet in my office. Our other collaborators from Beyond UK are Dr. Bobby Sarton-Long, co-PI, whose specialty is library information science, and Dr. Carol Russell, special education scholar, both of whom are from Emporia State University. Dr. Denise Atkins, the other co-PI and professor in library and information science, and Dr. Melissa Stormont, special education scholar, and Alicia Long, doctoral candidate in library and information science, are all from the University of Missouri. So the SCALE project was funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences. And now Caroline is going to give an overview about the purpose and basis of the SCALE project.
There we go. For all children, the quality of their learning environments and interactions in the first years of life set the stage for school success and have lasting impacts on mental and physical health and well-being across the lifespan. However, the importance of quality early learning experiences is amplified for children with disabilities. In addition to needing access to mainstream child-focused programs and services promoting learning, play, participation, peer interaction, and friendships, experiences that are all essential for all children, they also require targeted intervention services. As you know, libraries provide rich learning opportunities for young children and their caregivers. Programs for young children are offered in nearly all public libraries in the United States. These programs support children's social development, school readiness, and general well-being. They also educate caregivers about meaningful ways to interact with the children. Put differently, these programs have lasting impacts and implications in the lives of children and caregivers. However, even when libraries do provide programs for young children with disabilities, their families may not feel welcome. A number of recent studies in the US and Canada suggest that parents of children with behavioral and cognitive disabilities feel discouraged to bring their children to the libraries and even experience shame and dread when they do so. Library programs and services should be open to and accessible for all children, including those with disabilities and/or developmental delays. As conveyed in a recent Institute of Museum and Library Sciences report, the library community needs to bring its services to people with disabilities to the forefront so that libraries can learn from each other and build a shared investment in the outcomes, close quote. And that is from Hill, Streams, Dooley, and Morse, 2015, page 11. Now I want to turn the mic over to Derek, who, without getting too far in the weeds, will talk about how we collected and analyzed data.
So we designed the SCALE project to answer the overarching question, how can public libraries better meet the needs of young children with disabilities and/or developmental delays and their families? Importantly, because the goal of the project is to identify ways to help libraries do better, we approached this research from an appreciative perspective in which we intentionally sought out promising practices or those things that are already working in libraries. Does that mean we turned a blind eye to problems and practices that we encountered? Of course not. We know that few things, if any, that human beings create are perfect, so we knew we would encounter problems, but we did not intentionally seek them out. For the past 3.5 years, we've been collecting and analyzing a lot of data. We've collected 223 pieces of data from 10 public libraries and outreach sites connected with them. We conducted 24 observations of programs for young children. 14 of those were inclusive, 5 specialized for children with disabilities, and 5 offered at-reach at outreach locations.
So
Need the next slide?
are we not there? I'm so sorry.
Not yet. Okay. For this presentation, we will use person-first language to recognize that children are children first, with disabilities secondarily. Note that in the field of disability, some persons prefer identity-first language to indicate that their disability is of primary importance to them. Some examples are autistics, deaf persons, and blind persons. If in doubt about which language to use, ask the person directly. Libraries have a long history of championing accessibility, and accessibility is a good thing. But accessibility is not the same as inclusion. When we think about accessibility, we think about solutions that don't discriminate and are largely responsive to guidelines to ensure individuals with disabilities can access digital and place-based services, resources, and programs. Inclusion, on the other hand, is focused on ensuring a user-friendly experience and reducing or eliminating barriers for all. Inclusive practices involve activities in which children with and without disabilities engage together. Libraries should support children with disabilities in terms of the physical environment, the social environment, and the learning environment. Libraries have long done an impressive job of ensuring inclusion in terms of the physical environment, and in the last decade or so, they are doing a much better job of attending to inclusion in terms of social and learning environments. In the slides ahead, we'll provide more detailed information about how. For now, let's focus on why library inclusion of young children with disabilities is vital. As you can see here, within the United States, 3.2% of children up to 3 years of age and 6.2% of children ages 3 to 5 years are receiving services through the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act for documented disability or developmental delay. In other words, a significant number of children in the U.S. are receiving services for a disability prior to kindergarten entry. We surveyed caregivers who attended the programs that we observed for this project. More than 7% of those caregivers reported that one or more children attending the program with them the day of the observation had one or more identified disabilities. That is, the percentage of young children attending library programs exceeds the rate found in the general population. So what libraries are doing so well that families of young children with disabilities are opting to bring them to library programs? We'll address that throughout the remainder of this presentation. As we do so, we'll try to take a telescopic approach first and then hone in on specific things that many library programs are already doing well in terms of inclusivity, as well as some other ideas for how libraries could make their services and programs more inclusive.
So we begin this portion of the presentation with a focus on inclusivity, because we believe this lays a solid foundation for all services and programs. Inclusivity is something that all libraries, regardless of size or budget, can achieve, but as the title of the webinar suggests, libraries cannot stop with a culture of inclusion. They must take additional steps to make libraries accessible for individuals with disabilities, keeping in mind that full accessibility moves beyond physical spaces and also serves as the foundation for the social environment and the learning environment of the library. On the next slide, you'll hear the words of a library director that drives this point home. To maintain participant anonymity, this and other quotes throughout the presentation are facetiously voiced.
I think inclusion is a journey, and I don't know that anyone has arrived at the destination on that yet. One thing we've been talking a lot about at our library is making sure that we start internally first, because if we have an inclusive staff environment, then that will naturally present itself to our customers as well.
Establishing a culture of inclusion needs to be embedded in the library's institutional framework. It should be reflected in strategic plans and shared missions among librarians. Inclusivity is realized through ongoing training opportunities and collections and services that are meaningfully reflective of the community and the larger world. A culture of inclusion is realized through the establishment of welcoming environments, programming that is inclusive for all, and consistent and effective communication. For non-library folks, like me, we'll begin with an overview of ways that libraries have been trying to transform their image and build upon their missions. So libraries nationwide have recently been redesigning children's areas to serve as comfortable spaces that enable a wide array of activities and noise levels. Certainly, most libraries offer zones and/or rooms that are intended to be relatively quiet for studying, working, and reading, but other parts of libraries are designed for group activity and social engagement. Children's areas, in particular, have been transformed to support free play via playrooms with toys and games for both gross and fine motor movement, and families are encouraged to use them for play and social interaction.
I think a message would be just to reassure families that this is a place for them to come and that they can feel comfortable here.
So recently, some libraries have designed sensory spaces with the library intended to be used by individuals who might feel overwhelmed in the open play areas described by Derek. These sensory rooms tend to be spaces with customizable lighting that can be adjusted based on sensory needs. Sensory rooms contain equipment such as bubble lamps, activity walls, and manipulatives to support sensory relaxation, learning, and play involving both fine and gross motor movement. The rooms are designed for individual, family, or small group use, and they can be reserved in advance or on a walk-in basis, which allows families to adjust the environment based on their children's needs. Images on this slide are of the sensory room at the main branch of the Boone County, Kentucky Public Library and are used with permission. As you can see, this room offers calming activities, tactile manipulatives, and more. It's enclosed to enable either a soothing and calm or a loud and active experience, depending on the specific needs of the individuals utilizing the space. While we think this is a fabulous thing for libraries to do, we also recognize that not all libraries have the space or the resources to create sensory rooms. And so for the remainder of the presentation, we're going to try to focus on things that all libraries can do in terms of inclusive spaces and practice. So ideally, play areas within children's sections and other social library spaces engender inclusivity by functioning as modern-day town squares where members of the community can interface in parallel activities as well as through programs designed to facilitate conversation and discussion. Caregivers of young children with disabilities who themselves are experiencing heightened stress in relation to their children's diagnoses might value opportunities to socially interact with other adults experiencing similar life situations. Play spaces also support children's learning. Play is not only a fun activity that children across cultures enjoy, it also supports children's cognitive, physical, social, and emotional development and facilities that build world knowledge. Libraries have long supported children's free play through the provision of toys and materials such as train tables, Legos, and other forms of building blocks, dress-up clothes, and manipulatives to support dramatic play. Puppets, crafting materials to inspire creativity. And more recently, libraries have integrated visual signs and other tools to support caregiver-child interaction. For example, a sign next to a train table might encourage caregivers to expose their children to interesting words such as rolling or joining or stuck, or to engage in math-related conversations involving speed, distance, shape, size.
He would play there all day long if I let him. The toys are just so perfect for his age, and even ones that are a little bit higher or lower than him, he still loves them so much.
So what does an inclusive library space look like? It looks like books and materials that are representative for all. So those of you who are in library spaces can ask yourselves, can families see themselves as well as families who look different from them in the books on display and in the promotional materials, both in the physical and digital library spaces? What about in the play spaces? Do toys and play accessories, such as dress-up materials, reflect people of all types and in non-stereotypical ways? Are signs presented in all languages spoken in the community? Are signs written in fonts, sizes, and colors that make them clear and easily discernible? Are written messages at a reading level appropriate for all caregivers? Are written messages translated into all languages spoken in the community? An inclusive space also looks like one where library staff acknowledge and treat everyone with respect. Do expressions and body language of library staff convey approachability and respect? Are all children and caregivers welcomed into library spaces? Do library staff respond to the questions and interests of all children and caregivers? Are expectations for use of space and materials explicit and written in language that's positive? For example, you're free to use any art supplies on this table, but please put them up as this table. Please use them only at this table so they don't get lost. Also, remember to put everything back in order when you finish. An inclusive space is also one that's designed to facilitate socialization and interaction. So our toys and spaces arranged so that multiple children can explore and play simultaneously. Is furniture arranged in a manner that invites gathering? Are places for caregiver gatherings situated in a manner that enable them to watch their children and socialize with other adults simultaneously? Is furniture arranged to allow for full mobility of all children and caregivers? Notably, some individuals can become overstimulated and may need a quiet place to feel at ease or to calm and regulate. Of course, not every library has the resources or space to create full sensory rooms, but think about how you might situate at least one or two quiet zones within or adjacent to the larger children's area. As one example, large cardboard boxes with pillows inside can be decorated by the children and allow for safe, quiet spaces for individual time and for reprieve. So now let's turn our attention to how library spaces can be designed or modified to facilitate inclusion in relation to learning. Across the lifespan, for the majority of persons, up to 95% of science learning tends to occur in informal settings. And we know that early childhood experiences serve as bootstraps for subsequent learning. So we are serving our communities well when we create library environments that lead children to a deepened understanding of science, technology, and engineering and math topics, and towards interest in STEM learning generally, and as a prospective career goal later in life. What's more, informal spaces like libraries that engender learning that are particularly important in relation to STEM are necessary in rural communities where there are fewer opportunities. So what characteristics of an environment make them conducive to learning for all? Opportunities for engagement, interest in the materials, people, or topic, inclusion of objects that enable a child to view the consequences of actions, and encouragement of exploration from others. I want to highlight the last point from the previous slide. One characteristic of an environment that makes it conducive to learning is encouragement from others. In other words, informal learning is often linked with social motivations and activities. So when we interact with others, we learn from them. So all of the ways that you're situating library environments to support socialization, all those things that we just talked about, they also foster learning for children.
Maria, we have a request to read the text out loud on the videos as well.
Oh, I can do that. Sure. Um, so I'll just go ahead and read it instead of having the voice. I need a social life for my kids. So interaction with other children and playing, exploring different things and meeting different people. Basically, that's why we go to the library.
I need a social life.
Oh, I'm so sorry. All right. So what materials belong in an environment designed for inclusive learning? Materials that encourage exploration, that activate different senses or enable engagement via different modalities, that support genuine excitement and interest, and that propel learning via socialization. Here are some questions to consider when examining your own library spaces. The materials in your children's area afford opportunities for multisensory learning. What materials in your spaces prompt visual excitement or promote visual learning? Maybe through different contrast and color, size, shape, etc. What materials in your space promote auditory learning, like shaker toys or rain sticks or chimes or bells or musical instruments? What materials in your space prompt olfactory excitement or learning? So maybe like scented bean bags or jars or markers. What materials in your space prompt tactile excitement or learning? So like textured boards, sensory bins filled with materials such as rice, beans, dried pasta. Do materials in your children's area afford opportunities for fine motor development? Do they promote cooperative play between children? And are they situated in a manner that multiple children can access them simultaneously? Do your materials support a variety of child interests and ability levels? Do electronic devices designed to support children's interests and scaffold their digital skills allow for adult mediation? And I ask this because a lot of times you'll see in libraries and in other informal learning spaces, you'll see digital equipment that's accompanied by headphones, and that does reduce the noise, but it also limits the opportunities for socialization between kids, like for kids to view things together on a screen, and it also reduces the opportunities for adult mediation and for adult discussion of what's being viewed on the screen. So caregivers told us we work everything around our schedule so we can make it to library time because it's something that we look forward to. And so in the slides ahead, we're going to focus on ways that we can make programming inclusive. Our caregivers shared with us the importance of library programming and how it becomes an essential component of their lives. Caregiver 5, I already told you that they work everything around their schedule. Caregiver 1 told us we're there every week if we're not sick. And caregiver 7 said, being there is what matters the most. It becomes a habit. So we asked our caregivers what elements of the programs they most enjoyed and what elements of the programs their children most enjoyed. The caregivers told us that they're attending library programs for that interaction with other children and adults. They value the learning opportunities and they value the school readiness, but it's really the socialization that's bringing them in. And so everything that we can do to facilitate that interaction is so important. When we asked them, both those whose children have disabilities as well as those who don't, what elements of the program they and their children enjoy the most. The caregivers told us that their children enjoy the arts and the crafts, the music and the songs, and that social interaction. As caregivers, they enjoy watching their children engage in activities. They enjoy watching their children have fun, and they enjoy watching their children socialize with other children. But for them personally, they enjoy a time to socialize with librarians and with other adults. They also told us that they appreciate just a time to like that for them, it's good for their own well-being to have a time where they're fully engaging with their kids, but they're not the one that's leading all the activity. And so I think as libraries, I think we can pat ourselves on the back for being good for kids, but also being good for caregivers and for helping both groups, like in their social well-being and in their mental well-being. So now let's focus on ways to make programs inclusive and to do so in a way that targets both socialization and learning, and ways that are fun-filled and active. There are probably a few ninjas in the world who are able to react on a moment's notice, but for most of us, inclusivity and the many beneficial aspects of programming for young children are based on planning ahead. So many of us have trouble just acting in the moment. And so I think it's important for us to remember that and to plan ahead so that we know everything we're doing is inclusive. So what are ways we can ensure inclusivity at the planning stage? The number one tip I can provide is this. There's a whole lot of power in routine and repetition. All of us, but young children in particular, are better positioned to learn best when new ideas and information come in small doses and are embedded in a framework of existing knowledge. All of us, but young children especially, are positioned to learn best when we are emotionally at ease and enjoying what we're doing. Young children enjoy and take comfort in structure and routine. And if you're being completely honest with yourself, you probably do too. Think about how much better your day begins when you follow a regular morning routine and how disruptive unexpected circumstances can be. The same is true for young children. They take comfort in knowing what's coming next. You can build in opportunities for learning by staying within a standard structure from week to week. This is good for all children, but particularly beneficial for children with disabilities. On the next slide, you'll hear words of a mother of a child who is both legally blind and has autism. You won't hear her words, I'll just read them. Keeping the same format, that's really helpful. It's so helpful that everything is set up the same way every week because he knows where to go. He knows what stuff he can touch and what he can't. So at the planning stage, librarians can take additional measures to facilitate inclusivity. As we already mentioned, we are positioned to learn best when our minds know what to expect, and the best way to do this is to stick to a routine. But it's also really helpful for some children and adults alike to be able to see an agenda. If you're building your programs around a routine, then updating a visual agenda from week to week or program to program is going to be a relatively easy task. Keep in mind that approximately half of the participants of your program are emerging readers, and you may also have participants whose first language is not English. So embed as many icons as you can into your written agenda. We recommend using icons that are designed for communication boards to help young children expand their receptive and expressive communication. So the image on this slide is from a post by Renee Grassi on the AASL blog, and it shows how she uses a visual schedule created with the communication board icons. Caregiver 5 told us, I'm a huge proponent of schedule and routine. When a child is comfortable in their environment, they are so much more open to learning, and their development just increases exponentially. When they are in an environment where they know what's going to happen next, and there's no just surprises out of the blue, and some kids, do fine with an unpredictable environment. But I've seen many children are just happier because they know what's coming next and they don't have to second guess anything. So next, consider other ways that you can set children up for learning success within a standard routine. Be sure to provide a variety of resources, materials, and activities that support a variety of interest and ability levels or diverse activities. As we mentioned when discussing playful environments, children tend to learn through embodied experiences. So be sure that you're integrating components that are multisensory so that children are able to rely on more than one sense to participate. For example, when designing experiences that are primarily visual, think about how you might draw on other modes for participants with low vision. How can you embed descriptors or textures to facilitate the experience? A second example might be pairing tactile or movement activities with auditory components of your programs. Does that sound like it might involve pairing music with dancing, or finger play with chant, or actions with rhymes? Those are all things that I bet many of you are already doing. So caregivers perceive these diverse activities as essential for keeping their children fully engaged. As caregiver 9 conveys, she actively involves them, she being the librarian. And it's a quick transition from one thing to the next. So that really helps. And with that age group, they definitely need things just constantly changing. She sings, which is always a good thing, and then the stories, and then they're up and moving, and they're back down, and they're up and moving. So keeping in mind that inclusion moves beyond just the physical environment and encompasses socialization and learning, and these are also the reasons why caregivers are bringing their children to the library programs. Think about how you can support children's opportunities to interact with others and also to enhance their learning. So embedding open-ended questions throughout the program should facilitate both socialization as well as learning. And I know that sounds really easy, but I promise you it's harder to do on the spur of the moment than you might think. And so I highly encourage you to plan open-ended questions in advance. You can write these questions on sticky notes and place them on the back of your books or other materials so that you have them easily at hand when you're ready for them. But regardless of whether or not you need the visual reminder, I personally think you should plan the questions themselves in advance. So the last planning element we want to address is representation. Consider the materials you're planning to use in your programs and consider the extent to which they provide opportunities for the families participating in your programs to see themselves reflected in those materials and the extent to which they provide opportunities to see others of all stripes reflected in those materials. So now let's talk about some specific inclusivity measures librarians can take to make all programs inclusive. First, people tend to feel included when others communicate with them directly and with respect. You can make it much easier for yourself and for your participants to do that by providing name tags, both for the children as well as the caregivers. Having name tags enables you and other adult participants to address children and adults directly by name. This is particularly important for caregivers of children with disabilities, who the research literature tells us sometimes feel socially isolated. Caregiver 5 told us, I know that some adults are not there to make friends and interact. I completely understand. But maybe offering, hey, if you want to wear a name tag, your kid's got one too. Here's one for you. Um, Keep in mind that people also feel included when they're physically comfortable. So set the room up in a manner that children and adults alike can participate in a manner that is physically comfortable. Do you have seating options for participants who might not be able to sit on the floor? Does the seating arrangement enable everyone to be able to see what's happening and feel included? Does the seating arrangement enable children who want or need the comfort of a caregiver to sit in close proximity to them? Does the physical arrangement allow for wheelchairs and special seating? Is adaptive seating available if and when needed? For example, sensory seat cushions, balance ball chairs, etc. Also, even if you think your voice is loud, use a microphone if you can, especially if you have a lot of participants. If you have noise reducing headphones, or if your library provides an ASL or other language interpreter upon request, be sure that that information is posted in the room where the programming takes place and on the marketing materials as well. Next, set the stage for success by letting children and caregivers know what to expect from the program and what the behavioral expectations are. This is a vital part of a program routine. The idea is that over time, everyone learns what is appropriate and what options are available when inappropriate behavior occurs. Basically, it teaches children to become self-aware and self-regulate their behavior, as well as teaches the caregivers how they can support their children and the librarians during programming. If you want adults to participate, make that clear and do it with positive language. If you want participants to feel comfortable with leaving and returning to the program based on their family's needs, for example, if someone has to go to the bathroom, let them know. If you have elements in the program that might be overstimulating for some participants, make that clear from the beginning. Finally, let caregivers know that you're receptive to their family's needs and that you're available for conversations after the program. So here's what an opening spiel might sound like. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Maria. I look forward to some fun for everyone during our program today. If you've been here before, you know that children and adults get to participate together. This is a program where everyone gets to listen, interact, move, and have fun, adults and children alike. Adults, if your child gets up or needs to step out for a moment, that's perfectly fine. We invite you to return as soon as you're comfortable. Here's what we have in store for you today, and then you'll use your visual agenda to move through the program elements. As we do every week, we'll begin with our opening song, and then we'll read our first book. You get what I mean. So you just give a play-by-play overview of what's going to happen, and then you conclude the spiel with something along the lines of, I try to make the program an active learning event with opportunities for moving, singing, listening, and talking. While I'm reading books, I don't expect young children to sit perfectly still, so don't fret if your child needs to move a bit. I just ask that we try to keep the space immediately in front of me free so that everyone can see what I'm doing. I want everyone to have fun and learn today and in this and in every program. So I'll be around at the end of the program if you want to talk to me about ways to maximize the fun and learning for your child. And now let's get started. As Caregiver 9 shares, the adults bring their children to your programs and they genuinely appreciate it when you are explicit about what's to come and how you are open to suggestions from them about how to make the program beneficial for their families. Caregiver 9 says, I think she does a really good job in asking us, if there's something specific that we're looking at. And she kind of tells us what's coming up. She's very approachable. She's very friendly. I mean, I think she does a great job of just inviting us to offer suggestions. Even, I'm here at the end for a few minutes if you want to talk to me or those kinds of things. Or I can show you something. I think she does a really good job of inviting us. And even if we're not comfortable saying something in a crowd, she always says, I'm here. I could go up to her privately and ask for something. So we've probably all heard that we learn best by doing. And the science of learning tells us that children learn best when they are both hands-on and minds-on. The hands-on or active learning elements are things that librarians excel at. But let's talk just a little bit about how to make embodied learning inclusive. One way to do so is through repetition. We already talked about building programs around routines, and that's one form of repetition. But we can also design programs to have elements of repetition within them. And this is particularly important for participants who need multiple opportunities to achieve mastery. At minimum, consider 3 repetitions for every embodied activity that is new to the program. The first occurrence will be you providing an explanation of what's going to occur. The second time will be an opportunity for the participants to join in and practice the activity. And then the third time will be an opportunity for everyone to apply what they just practiced. So the 3 repetitions would sound something like this. Let's make our fingers into spiders. Next, we're going to pretend that our fingers are walking up a spout like this, and then falling down. And then you would have them, do the itsy bitsy spider. And then finally, you would do it once again. And you'll have some kids that aren't going to master it in the first or second attempt. And you'll have some that do. And yet, I think all kids are going to enjoy participating in all 3 repetitions. So don't worry about the fact that it's too much repetition. Kids like repetition. Okay, so now let's talk about how we can ratchet up learning for all participants by asking questions. We have decades of studies that tell us that one way to enhance children's language and thinking is by providing opportunities for them to verbally or gesturally react and respond to ideas and events in books during shared reading. We also know that learning is much richer and the language growth is much greater when the questions that we pose are open-ended. So think about how much more thinking opportunities and language opportunities can happen when you ask a question like, gosh, that ladybug sure was grouchy. And now now we know why. Can you think of a time when you were grouchy? What made you so grouchy? So there's lots of opportunities for interaction and for expressive language versus what color is that ladybug? And of course, anyone who's worked with a group of children knows that there are going to be 1 or 2 learners who are going to be the first to react and respond to almost every question you ask. But the nice thing about library programs is that you have caregivers participating with their children. So when you ask a question, consider integrating this phrase. I want you to go to your adult and tell them whatever the question is. This way, every single child has an opportunity to answer the questions you pose. And you're also modeling for the caregivers the ways they can enrich their own reading experiences with their children. And you're giving the child and caregivers opportunities to socialize with each other around the topic of the book. So those open-ended questions are so important to integrate into shared book reading elements within your programs. And you should absolutely be integrating open-ended questions into every single program and utilizing caregivers to make those interactions rich for every single child. But you'll probably also want to ask those WH questions like the what, where, why, who questions throughout other elements of the program. And you still want to make sure that you're doing so in a manner that every child can benefit. And that requires you to build in wait time so that those children who need more time to process the information and to generate a response still have opportunities to fully benefit. So I find silently counting to 7, first of all, helps me know like how much wait time is enough wait time. But it also, should provide sufficient opportunity. of course, we've already talked about those children that tend to be the first in responding to questions. And so you want to make sure that you're very intentional about holding off responses from those children who are able to process information more quickly. There are three strategies that you might think about using. The first one is to utilize the caregivers that we've already talked about. Another strategy is to have the children pair up and tell each other answers. So you would say something like, I'm going to ask a question and I wanted you to think about your answer in your head. And then when I tell you, I want you to tell the person sitting next to you. So first, let's have everyone find a friend, and then you could have the adults, help their child find a friend. And then, you ask the question and you say, share it with your friend. A third strategy is to preface your question with a statement along the lines of, I'm going to ask a question and I want everyone to think the answer in their head. Out and don't say it out loud. Think it in your head. And I'm going to point to one friend to answer. And then after you've practiced those strategies at least once, you can begin employing them. So you're always going to have those one or two kids that shout out a response. And we'll talk more about behavior management strategies in just a minute. But in that situation, I might say something along the lines of, I can only hear the answers to the children I point at, so be sure to wait. Yeah, I'm going to pass the torch to Derek.
As we've already discussed, children and adults alike are best positioned to learn when they know what's coming and when they're positively positioned for learning. So one way that we make programs inclusive is by prioritizing a positive experience for everyone. That means managing behaviors through positive reinforcement and redirection. So as much as possible, reinforce behaviors that you want to see, both those of the children as well as those of the caregivers. This is particularly important at the beginning of a program session. So say something like, oh, I just love the way that everyone participated in our opening song. Adults, your children tend to be more comfortable and have more fun when they see you participating. So thank you for singing along and helping your children with the motions. Goes a long way in signaling to the adults that what you expect them to do in terms of participation. Keep in mind that when you've given a behavioral expectation or direction, but don't have full compliance, it's much more effective to say something like, for example, Sarah, Jamil, and Xavier, thank you for putting your shakers back in the box. Who can be the next one to get their shakers back in the box? Michaela, can you show everyone how they should put their shakers back in the box? Another important strategy when a child is exhibiting behavior that is inappropriate or distracting is to redirect the child's attention or energy to a task that is appropriate or preferred. For example, if a child is touching another child, you might offer to have the child hold the next book for you until you are ready to read it. Another example might be giving the child a job or making them a helper in some way. You want to be careful not to reward inappropriate or non-preferred behavior, but this is a common strategy used in education classrooms as well. In our observations, we saw librarians who brought fidget toys with them into programs and used them to redirect attention when children needed that. Another common strategy in the data was shifting to movement-based activities. Here's a quote from Caregiver 1 about how the librarian in the programs he attends is able to redirect children. Quote, I have seen a lot of kids that are needing to do something with their hands. And so anytime that's happening, usually there's some sort of hands-on activity during the preschool story time. And so the librarian will have kids hold something and then they can play with that while she's reading the story, close quote.
I have seen a lot of.
Sometimes the best laid plans just don't work out the way we expected, though. And so being effective means that we also have to manage our own expectations. Sometimes that requires that we adjust our plans and act responsively to the needs at hand. For example, if you can tell that the group that you're working with cannot handle 2 books today, don't read the second one. Sometimes it means relaxing the rules or expectations, particularly in relation to children sitting still by allowing them to roam and explore within limits. Truly, families appreciate the programs libraries provide. They value the expertise of librarians and they enjoy socializing during these programs. Within programs, children's staff are engaging in a number of inclusive practices. Even so, caregivers of children with disabilities' perceptions about their child's abilities to meet and interact with others was not as positive as those caregivers whose children have not been identified with disabilities. If libraries want to continue to attract young families of children with disabilities, they need to build opportunities for social interaction into the programs they provide, and they need to take steps to facilitate interaction among children and adults. We've identified a few simple strategies, such as using name tags within programs, but it's important that we facilitate opportunities for socialization after programs as well, so that all caregivers and children have opportunities to develop relationships. One way that we observed libraries facilitating this social interaction was through informal play or crafting experiences immediately following the programs. In fact, several of the children and caregivers we spoke with pointed to crafts, especially as an element of the programs they especially enjoyed, and one that allowed them to make friends with others. As caregiver 7 shares, do you like painting? That's what she always tells me. I tell her we're going to the library and she's like, story time? And she always wants to paint at the end. That's usually her favorite. And so, do you like to paint? The child says yes. Do you like story time? The child says yes. Do you like do you like story time? What do you like in story time? Paint, the child says. You like to paint? The child says yes. Do you like bubbles? The child says yes. Do you like to dance? The child says no. That's right, you don't like to dance, the caregiver ends. Overwhelmingly, caregivers of children with and without disabilities expressed admiration of the library staff overseeing children's services and programs. They viewed them as experts and recognized the care these providers gave to developing relationships with families and intentionally embedding within programs. Caregivers and children both told us how much they enjoyed library programs and how they built their schedules around them. The work libraries are doing within children's library services and children's library spaces are much appreciated. Caregiver 7 shared, quote, like Miss Librarian, I just feel like she really knows how to work with the kids. So I feel like having an educated staff is really important. And someone who can really get into it is what makes it a good experience. So I got my degree in early childhood education, so I kind of know what to look for. I know what kids need at that age. I don't know what her background is, but I feel like she knows what to do. She loves it and she's excited to come, close quote.
I feel like having.
As we've indicated already, families appreciate the programs libraries provide. They value the expertise of the librarians and they enjoy socializing during those programs. Within those programs, library staff are engaging in a number of inclusive practices. Even so, caregivers of children with disabilities' perceptions of their children's enjoyment of library programs and the music within library programs was not as positive as those of caregivers whose children who had not been identified with disabilities. To this end, we recommend that libraries consider how program size and program scheduling serve as barriers for some families. As you can see in this quote from Caregiver 7, quote, there are some times when story time is packed and it's kind of chaotic, close quote. This is not a fun situation for many caregivers, but it's particularly troubling for some families.
There are some times when
some children, regardless of disability status, feel overwhelmed and intimidated in crowds. Caregivers also report diminished outcomes for their children and themselves when programs are too long or too large. To that end, we recommend that libraries do what they can to make programs manageable in size. Additionally, libraries should be offering programs and services in evenings and on weekends to be conducive to the schedules of families with caregivers who work during the day. Interestingly, librarians and directors pointed to their evening and weekend programs as a strategy for serving all members of the community, Yet the caregivers expressed dismay that the same libraries offered so few weekend and evening programs. At the same time, some librarians reported that when they offered evening and weekend programs, attendance was low or non-existent. This indicates the need to work closely with parents to find that sweet spot that meets their needs. Caregiver 9 shared, quote, "They have all kinds of things for young kids during the day, but then those working parents can't take them. And so I wish there was, even if it was just one night a week. They had a story time for young kids, but in the evening so their parents could take them," close quote.
They have all kinds.
Librarians and directors alike perceived few children with disabilities attending programs or utilizing library services. Part of the issue is perceptual, as many disabilities are invisible, but with some adjustments to marketing and promotion strategies, libraries can reach additional families. Both early intervention coordinators and caregivers whom we interviewed identified a lack of awareness in the community regarding library programs for children with disabilities and their families. Caregiver 1 shared this, quote, "And I would also wish that more of the community would take part in all of this stuff that is available because they have such really cool things," close quote.
And I would.
As part of this project, we worked in collaboration with Ryan Creech at the UK Human Development Institute, who is with us here today, to create a one-page folding handout that is one sheet of paper with 4 pages of text and images that libraries can download, tailor to include their own branding and information about their services and programs, and then print and distribute to healthcare providers, early intervention coordinators, organizations and agencies in their community that serve young children with disabilities. The intention of the handout is to communicate to families of children with disabilities that libraries are fun places designed for play, social interaction, and hands-on learning, and they are designed for everyone, including families like yours. If you are interested in utilizing this template for your library, we'll soon be placing it in the University of Kentucky Repository, UK Knowledge. For now, Walt Bauer will be including a link to it in the chat. We invite you to personalize the handout and then distribute print copies to all of the appropriate locations in your community and distribute electronic copies via social media and other existing digital communication platforms. We've zoomed in on the brochure here to show you where you can insert your library's own branding on the cover. And within the handout, you can add program and service information from your library. Finally, on the back side, you can include your own library branding and location information. We've also created a great self-assessment tool that you can use to identify how your physical spaces, programs, and digital spaces are designed for inclusivity. Again, Walt will share links to these in the chat.
So we realize we've only skimmed the surface in our presentation today. Please know that we've already produced some publications that we've listed on the screen. And we have a few other manuscripts currently in production and in the works. So we hope to be producing these for the months to come. And all of these publications will go deeper into the various aspects we've covered today. For now, we'd like to open the floor to questions and comments from you.
Walt, I know there are lots of comments in the chat or questions if you want to let us know what those are.
I would be happy to. We don't have any questions quite yet.
I just wanted to say there was a question in the chat about picture communication symbols. And I provided a link in the chat to the collection by Toby Dynavox. And there is also another really good resource for that, and I will post that in the chat as well. It is by the government of Aragon, which is a region in Spain, and they provide Creative Commons like open use pictograms. So I'll go ahead and post a link to that in the chat as well.
That's awesome. Thank you.
If you have a question, please feel free to put it in the Q&A box or the chat. We have a question in the chat. The question is from Pearl. Is there anything that should be done differently for babies from 0 to 18 months? Programs for babies.
That's a great question. I would say that the best way to support babies is to be supporting their caregivers because like what's so beneficial for those babies is the interaction with their caregivers. And so when you're being inclusive, like for your community at large, and you're welcoming those caregivers in, you're also supporting those babies. But I'll let Caroline and Derek, and actually all of you who are attending this are probably have some level of expertise as well, and you're doing this every day. Our level of expertise is from a different stance than yours, but it doesn't mean that yours is any better or any worse, or that ours is any better or any worse. So if others have ideas about how to be inclusive for the very young children, babies, we open the floor to everybody, but I'll turn the mic over to Caroline and Derek first.
Thanks, Maria. I would say when we're looking at infants and babies, be sure to have materials that can be washed after the session. Be sure to have comfortable seating for the infants and for the parents. And I would keep the expected attention span very short with, many different options for kids, and give them room to move around and rotate from one activity to the next with not a lot of expectations for long attending. Just let them free play in your safe area.
I don't have much to add to that. I think in our observations, though, I think, really building relationships with caregivers, learning what they're looking for in the program that you're offering seem to be an important thing for librarians that we're implementing preschool or toddler story times. I would just emphasize that. I don't know that that's anything different than what's happening, but it seemed to be very effective and seemed to really dovetail into what caregivers were looking for, particularly in relation to their own child's participation in development.
This question comes from Terry. How closely do you work with your county JFS or Board of Developmental Disabilities?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's one of the things that our participants told us was that they are most effective at reaching families of children with disabilities when they partner with their community agencies. And we had some focus group interviews with early intervention service coordinators, and they too said, you know what, libraries are doing lots of good things, we just don't know about them. And so those partnerships are so important. So thank you for bringing that up.
Linda has a question. Do you have any resources for program examples?
So, our study, all of our participants have the right for anonymity, and so we can't point you to the examples of the programs that we observed, but I suspect Amy Olson, if you're in Kentucky, Amy Olson has examples that she could probably point you to. And if you're in a state other than Kentucky, that youth services coordinator at your state library agency is probably aware of programs that are just doing a bang up job. Um, and they could probably point you to those. And I apologize that we can't, and yet I also want to protect our participants. So I apologize, but not sincerely.
Maria, I'll just add to that. If you all look at the self-assessment instrument, there's some really great links in there that take you to some examples and strategies. Very helpful.
This question is from Joanne Rojas. What were some of your biggest surprises working with so many libraries across the country?
I guess this isn't a surprise, but it was a pleasant, like, oh, I love this. Those, when we say like those caregivers appreciated what their libraries were doing, we are not making that, like, we're not exaggerating. Like, they just thought their libraries were phenomenal, and they recognized how much their librarians were doing for their families, and how willing their librarians were to do more for their families if they were asked to. And so that wasn't like a surprise. Like, I wasn't expecting to hear that. It was a surprise. Like, oh, it just warmed my heart to hear that it was such a prominent part of those interviews. That it was they really did appreciate all that y'all do. So that was a big thing for me. Caroline or Derek, do you want to any like for y'all?
I would say that it was difficult. We tried to get a lot of rural libraries to be involved, and they were pretty shy about being involved. And I think they don't realize some of the things they're doing already is very inclusive. So I think they were a bit hesitant to have us come in there and watch them, but I think actually they're doing more than they're aware of. But there were some that were quite shy to be involved.
And I'll piggyback on Caroline's comment. I mean, we just did an hour presentation on all the great things that libraries are doing to support not just children and caregivers in general, but children with disabilities and developmental delays that have kind of an enhanced need. There was something of a lack of confidence for some libraries to be involved. And some of this may have been coming out of the pandemic, and it had kind of upended services and programs anyways. But there were a lot of libraries that were just doing a fantastic job at some of this stuff. And I think that's a big finding from our study, was reporting on that there's a lot of best practices already out there. And now it's just a matter of putting it into a kind of centralized place for people to utilize in the field, or to confirm, in fact, this is what they're doing. Yeah.
Kind of piggybacking on what Caroline and Derek said. So we started this project in 2020. It was a magical time to be doing research with young children and families. But so we did take a pause to collect data because the timing just wasn't right. But then when we were ready to collect data, we went to the library. We looked at every single library website in the states where we were involved, and there was nothing on many of those sites that would have said to us, we offer things for families whose children have disabilities. And so I think it's important for libraries to recognize that their digital communication, that's how the people that aren't already coming are gonna find them, and to make sure that digital communication is so inclusive as well, and that there's something on there that says, like, whether you look like me or not, you're welcome here. Libraries are for everybody in our community, including people with disabilities, because that wasn't something that we could see looking at the digital materials that were coming out of libraries. And so that's something, I guess, that was surprising to me too, but in a not as positive way. And it kind of echoes something that Tess Prendergrass found in research that she did almost a decade ago.
Aaron has a comment. I love the resource you mentioned for sharing the information out. This would also be useful to make available to people at school resource centers, community centers, and agencies providing community support and support coordination services for kids and families. Jody has a question. I'm curious if there are any suggested ways to use the think, pair, share or similar conversation strategies with younger children or non-verbal children.
Maria, I can take a stab at that if you like. Jody, I think that's a great question. And I would say, as we think about communication with younger children, communication with children who use different ways to communicate, it's important that we accept whatever communication methods the kids have. It might be gestures, it might be an eye gaze, it might be a touch, whatever they use. As we're doing story time, I'm going to let the kids use whatever system they have. They can, say it to someone next to them. They can communicate with the person next to them. They communicate with their adult, or really I'm going to be open to whatever methods they use to communicate. It might be a, augmentative device. So I think it's important to just be really flexible and encouraging whatever method they use. We'll take it and go with it. And each child may have a different method, and that's okay. That's great, actually. So it's a really good question, Jody.
To piggyback on that, Caroline, one of our caregivers talked about his child who did have communication problems, and he said, like there were times where she says things, and even I have a hard time understanding her, and I am interacting with her all day, every day. And these librarians didn't skip a beat. Like they just reacted positively to her. They, like asked questions until they got it, but they never made her feel less than because they couldn't understand her. And so I think that respect that y'all are doing just goes a long way, and it's so heartwarming for parents.
This question is from Margaret. Has this information been shared with folks at Kentucky Public Libraries?
So I did a presentation earlier this month or late last month. I don't know. Time's kind of warping for me at the Kentucky Public Library Association. But and this gives me a great opportunity to also thank our advisory board. Amy Olson was a member of our advisory board, and we had advisors from departments of education, from the Kentucky governor's office, from KDLA, and from the other the agencies in our collaborator states as well. We're all supporting us through advisory services. Catherine Pierce did phenomenal work helping us shape our findings in ways that were practical for libraries. And so, yeah, this was a village that was helping us, and we're excited to be sharing this information with those who helped us. So, yeah, great suggestions, great ideas. Thank you.
Diana asks, is there a good, reliable resource for finding materials for sensory items? There are so many options. Where is a good place to start for research-supported items?
I have a thought. I used to be an autism teacher, and I know when you're a teacher,
that's a good question. Diana, please let us know. Go ahead,
you
dear.
get a lot of material sent to you, people trying to market to you things for your classroom. I would suggest reaching out to local autism teachers at elementary and even middle school levels. At a minimum, they can share which ones they tend to purchase from. But even more deeply, they can share what they have and how it's worked. They can kind of give you I've used it, here are the sorts of things that I find are more valuable. And that's, the contact is an email on a website. It's very easy to get a hold of teachers. Although the summer is coming, obviously, and they disappear, but that's a very good resource.
This comment is from Rebecca. We regularly teach sign language at every baby time.
That's really awesome. One of the programs we observed was a baby signs program. And so probably there are a lot of other people in this room that know more about this than I do, but apparently baby signs and American Sign Language are a little bit different. Um, but yeah, I think integrating that into programs is a great way to support kids. I had a child who had language issues, and we found when we started using those baby signs, like a, a light bulb went on for her, and her life became so much less frustrating. And so, yeah, giving caregivers those skills to work with their kids and use that type of language is so important. So awesome work.
Rebecca also had this comment. Seats with backs are helpful for caregivers with young children. Diana has a question. Any tips for engaging caregivers who only speak Spanish?
You know what? I so wish I were better equipped to answer your question. I'm really not. I think that's one of the reasons why those using those icons is nice for the visual scheduling. Um, I, we have a lot of experts in this webinar right now who aren't presenters. So ideas that you guys want to share in the chat would be great.
Sheila asks, thank you for the one resource for sharing with the community. Do you have any advice on how to make the community more aware through social media?
I would again say, like, make sure that your communications, all of your digital communications, like look inclusive and, like convey the message that everyone is welcome at a library.
Kate has a comment providing opportunities for serve and return experiences between caregivers and very young children will add to the experience for very young children. Gail adds choral reading of board books, babies and caregivers. I'm searching through for a question. And this question is from Tammy. Some libraries are planning programs that are solely for children with special needs. Others are making their programming inclusive. Can you weigh in on best practices recommendations pertaining to which is best?
I'll weigh in on that one. In early childhood education, it is our philosophy that inclusive is always best. Society is best when we include all with all our different abilities. And in education, that's what we believe, that all opportunities should be inclusive. So that is my 2 cents based on my experience. And there's, again, lots of people in this audience who could give their opinion as well.
I think best will vary, right? What a caregiver thinks is best, what a child thinks is best, and that necessarily will change, never stays the same. So I think whenever you can give options and allow people to move between them, self-select, adapt things as needed. This is kind of the mantra of special education, right? You start somewhere and then you remake it in conversation with others as you go. And I think library programs are no different.
Nisha has a comment. The library I work at includes on our calendar and signs in our programming spaces that if patrons or their families need accommodations to attend our programming, to please let us know so we can serve everyone in ways that are most helpful to them.
That's fabulous.
Joshua Siegel has a question. I understand these are public libraries. Were any of these libraries near schools where the library directors could get input from special education or school teachers if needed?
So we know that public libraries are in every community and schools are in every community. And library directors and children's librarians both told us that they value those partnerships with schools, and that some of the best ideas they get are from their school collaborators. And so, yes.
Tammy comments, Google Translate can be great, but talk to local community organizations such as Schools Head Start that are required to have translators to see if they can help with translation of your marketing materials. Ryan comments has added, don't forget about the Tech Act centers in each state. They are a great resource for advice on assistive technology for patrons with disabilities and have loan programs where you can borrow equipment to use in your children's programming.
And Aaron's added the link for our center here in Lexington, serves Central Kentucky.
Tammy adds, ask the family member to lead a song or a rhyme, read a book in their native language for story time. Ellen asked, does anyone have suggestions for low message sensory ideas for our activity play area?
That's a good question, Aline. I would say we can do sensory activities that are in a bin. So perhaps things like, I don't know, it's hard to think of a sensory item that doesn't like explode out of the container, but I would say put it in individual trays or put them in individual bins so that each child, we did that during COVID, so that each child would have their own bin to work in. And, as you're raising, I would say pick materials that don't especially like fly out of the container and that don't form into a lot of different pieces. Things like Play-Doh would tend to fall into pieces, but I would say think about some materials that tend to hang together, maybe more like clay perhaps that tends to hang together. And again, use individual bins that could keep it contained. That's a really good question, Eileen, and maybe other people will have additional ideas that they've used.
Nisha adds, we've done a post story time craft where you put paper in a Ziploc bag with paint. It's like finger painting without the mess. Rebecca adds, wading pool full of pon-pons to explore need to be large so they don't choke if they try to eat one. Rebecca adds, get a trifold display board like the ones used for science fairs and cover it with a variety of materials to be touched. I've used hot glue or a wire through the board to secure items.
There's a comment too from Terry. Sometimes something as simple as taping a toy to the wall so they can pull it off will spike their interest and entertain them. Which reminds me that we can also use like clear contact paper, stick it on a table, and kids can manipulate it without it moving. When they attach it to the table, they can touch it and put things on it without it moving. Those are great ideas, you all.
Yeah, the Velcro You can buy those Velcro things too that are.
Amelia comments, our county in Maryland has a translation team who can translate system-wide promotional and program materials. For instance, we have our summer reading game boards in the top 7 languages in the county, and bus placards in those languages placed on routes identified by a metrics person as having lots of riders who speak those specific languages.
There's also a comment from Rebecca about what they include in their program calendar, and it's a description of learning about Louis Braille and what Braille is like and how it feels. They've got a link there as well. It's a great sharing. Thanks, Rebecca.
Tammy adds, contact paper that's sticky on both sides works great for sensory exploration. Then Rebecca has sticky notes for little fingers to pull off. And restock is a great fine motor and sensory fun. Stick to a cookie sheet or poster board. Aaron adds, felt boards are also great tactile tools for creative play and storytelling, and which do not involve a lot of mess. Aaron asks, I want to have a program at my library that acts as an informal social gathering for children with sensory needs and their caregivers. Do you have any recommendations or resources on how I can best structure this program in terms of activities to allow for free socializing amongst the kids?
I would refer you, Aaron, also to that self-assessment tool. There's lots of concrete ideas on that. I would look at that as one place to start.
Yeah, I would also say have name tag.
I've seen schools do things similar like this, and they can base them around themes. You know, the Dinosaur Explorers Club or whatever it is. But it gives a source of ongoing themes, and it allows you to kind of loosely structure it. And generally with younger kids, you want to structure and then open the structure and then close the structure at will. So it still gives you a kind of source of that structure. So creating a group around maybe a theme or a type of activity or something like that, even if it's just the play group, that can be a source of fun, but also of shared interests. That may be another reason for bringing everyone together, as opposed to children with disabilities and delays. Although that's a good reason, some caregivers may not want to get together for those reasons. So coming together for dinosaurs is a different, sometimes much more positive reason. I've seen that work in schools, particularly elementary schools.
Great question, Aaron. Are there any other questions you would like to ask? We have a comment from Nisha. When it comes to picture communication systems, we were able to collaborate with a local nonprofit who was kind enough to fund putting 2 PCS boards on our library playground. I highly encourage people, if they're able, to see if there is a center of business in their community that may be willing to help get even one for your library. It allows kids with communication delays or speech impediments to communicate with their peers and adults. Any other questions for our presenters? So we have a comment from Ellen. My coworker at another branch does a program called Parent Playdate. She offers coloring and on-the-ground balance beams and other activities. Laura adds, thank you. I appreciated the Q&A sessions. Any other questions for our presenters today? Okay. Hearing none. As advertised, this has been great. It's been an honor and a privilege for all of you to join us today. I want to thank our presenters for taking time out of their day to share their expertise with us. We are so grateful for the variety of perspectives which brought out richness to this conversation and dialogue. Thank you for an informative presentation. Be well and stay safe, everyone.